Tonight's live stream is all about shoulder injuries in the gym. What are the most common causes, what you can do to avoid them, and also how you can continue training if you have a shoulder injury. Welcome, my name is Mareka, and I'm the physiotherapist at sportsinjuryphysio.com. If this is your first time here and you would like to learn how to stay injury-free, make sure to subscribe and hit the little bell so that you don't miss any of the updates. What are the most common injuries that I see happening in the gym with regards to shoulders? I think there are four that stands out for me. Of course there are more than that, but the four main ones I see is rotator cuff tears, shoulder impingement pain, bicep tendonitis or tendinosis, and then neck pain pretending to be shoulder pain. Good, so we'll start with rotator cuff tears. You can be pretty certain that you've torn something if you feel a sudden sharp pain while exercising. So imagine for a moment that you're pushing a heavy weight and you feel something just go in your shoulder. It doesn't have to be a big thing, sometimes it's just a twinge. Often people can even train and continue to train that evening, and then the next morning they wake up and feel, oh, their shoulder is really painful. Sometimes if it's a rather large tear, they can't actually continue to train. But if you've had a sudden sharp pain as the onset of the condition, it's likely that you've torn something in the shoulder. Your rotator cuff is quite important because they are the main stability muscles of the shoulder. So it's really important to rehabilitate and train them properly if you have injured them. So reasons why they get injured is, one is that you have likely tried to push too heavy weight for the movement. So you're not used to training, or you've really been trying to push the weight lately. Then the second is if you were tired, and that can be physical or mentally tired. There's good evidence out there to show that when athletes are mentally tired and feeling mentally exhausted, they are actually also more injury prone. And the reason for that is that mental fatigue also tires out your nervous system. And of course, your muscles and everything is controlled by the nervous system. So if your brain is tired, it's just basically not going to control your muscles properly, and you're more likely to strain things. And then lastly, one of the other reasons why you can get rotator cuff injuries is if you've got poor technique. That's why personal trainers are always so good at correcting clients. And if you can't, I'm interrupting myself there. So what I wanted to say is that's why personal trainers are always so good at correcting clients and annoying you with getting your technique right. But also the flip side of that, I had a personal trainer say to me today that it drives her nuts because she'll tell a client that you don't have the right form, we've got to make the weight lighter, try something different. And the client would say, no, I can do it. But the problem is, if you are all squashed up or you're really straining to do a weight, it's not worth doing it, because if you have proper form while doing it, you're not just strengthening your arms, you're actually strengthening all your stability muscles of your core, your neck, your shoulder girdle. With poor form, you're predisposing yourself to injury, but you're also really not strengthening any of your stability muscles. So it's worth listening to your personal trainer when they correct you. Okay, so top tip is listen to your personal trainer. Second is take extra care when you're tired. So if you're feeling exhausted from work, that may not be the best day to try a hard workout. It may be worth actually doing more of a relaxing workout or one that doesn't quite push you so far. And then the last thing would be, if you have complex movements that you are integrating into your training, make sure that you do them towards the beginning of the session when you're still rested, rather than towards the end. I'm seeing you guys are joining. Hello, Robert. Welcome. Clarence, I see you've also joined. Now remember, if you guys have any questions, even if you're watching it in the replay, make sure that you ask them in the comments and I'll get back to them for you. Okay. Good. So the second injury type is shoulder impingement. Shoulder impingement is a little bit of a vague term, and to be honest, my medical colleagues will probably all cringe when they hear me use it, because research feels that it's too vague. I tend to use it because patients seem to understand it. But to understand impingement better, I'm first going to explain to you how the shoulder girdle and the shoulder joint itself works. So our shoulder joint is actually made up of three bones. You've got your clavicle at the front, your collarbone, and you've got your shoulder blade at the back that comes over the top with a little hook, and that's the bone you can feel on the top there. So your collarbone and your shoulder blade comes and attaches to each other there. They form the roof of your shoulder joint. And then you have your arm, the humerus, that comes and fits into that roof. So there's a space between them in that area where you have your rotator cuff muscles and tendons that run through that. So right in that gap there. And you also have a little bursa, or actually a large bursa in there, which is a fluid-filled sac. And the whole reason it's there is to prevent friction between the bones and the tendons. Now, the problem with the shoulder is, whoops, let me not break everything, is that it's built for movement. So to allow your large range of movement, your shoulder blade is just loosely attached with muscles, not with ligaments and stuff, onto your thorax. And it's allowed to move quite freely when you move your arm. The problem is, if the shoulder blade doesn't get out of the way, your humerus can squash the things in between the bones there. So if you can imagine this, if my shoulder blade is in this position and I'm trying to lift my arm, you can see that I try this. I can only lift my arm that high. If I sit up nice and straight and I get my shoulder blade out of the way, I can actually get my arm all the way up. So give that a go. Roll your shoulders forwards and then try to lift your arm. You can't get it very high. But if you sit up nice and straight, you can actually get it higher. Now, it's normal for things in there to squash from time to time as we move. But if you repetitively do it, or you do it with a heavy weight, then you can actually cause inflammation and swelling in there. And it can be extremely painful. Often people find that they're not aware of hurting it during the session. It's usually the next morning that they wake up and go, oh, I can't move my arm. For women, it's usually when they try to reach behind and tie things up that they realize that it doesn't work. Or if you try to reach into your coat, you can't quite get your arm into that position. So it should be obvious that posture is key for shoulder impingement and avoiding shoulder impingement. And it's not just posture when you're using machines, but it's actually your actual standard posture. So if you can imagine people who work on in desk jobs a lot or slouch, they tend to be slightly round-shouldered and neck forwards. So immediately you're squashing your shoulder. Now, check this out. If you take your shoulder blades back but your neck stays forward, can you see how it's going to pull your shoulders forwards? Same thing, if your shoulders are rolled forwards, you can't actually get your neck back. So you've got to correct everything. And the easiest way to get yourself in better alignment is to actually just push the ceiling away with your head. The other big culprit for poor posture is tight pecs, because they attach to the front of the shoulder and causes the shoulder blades and everything to roll forwards. Now, most of the activities we do during the day involves pecs and working in front of us. And then also we tend to go to the gym and like to do all the pushing away type exercises, which again trains the pecs mostly. So it's really important that you stretch your pec muscles out quite regularly to avoid trouble with impingement issues. So I've actually kind of answered that, how to avoid it. One is good posture. So if you're struggling to get into a good posture, it's often because you tighten the thoracic spine. So you can do stretches to extend your thoracic spine. You can do stretches to stretch your pec muscle that runs at the front there. And then constantly throughout the day, correct yourself by growing tall. That's where classes like yoga and Pilates comes in quite handy, because they tend to correct you in those classes and make you really aware of your posture. When you're using gym equipment, you've got to make sure that you maintain a nice upright posture while you're doing any arm workouts. If you cannot maintain this posture and push the weight that you're pushing, the weight is too heavy. I know your arms may be able to do that, but you need to keep your stability in this bit if you want to avoid injury. Let me just check that I haven't forgotten anything. Nope, that's everything I wanted to say. Hi Trevor, I see you've joined us as well. So remember to ask questions if you guys are watching this on replay or live, and I'll answer them for you all in the comments. Okay, so we're moving on to biceps tendon injuries. I was thinking about this today, and I must say that the bicep tendon injuries goes hand in hand with posture as well, because your bicep tendon runs right over the front of the shoulder there, and that's how you know. It's usually when you press in there that the pain is mainly there, that it's the bicep tendon that's inflamed. So if your shoulder blades come forwards and you're doing things in that range, you can cause inflammation in the bicep tendon. But probably one of the most common ways that people flare it up is with tricep dips, with the arms at the back. The problem with that position is that the tendon is wrapped strongly over the bone. So if you now dip up and down, you're really grinding it on the bone. Now, if you are quite fit and you're strong and you're used to training, no problem. Unfortunately, it's usually people like me trying to do a workout at home, or is not really used to things like this, try and do that, and you tend to dip in too deep into it, and you don't really have all that control, and the other muscles aren't taking it part of the strain. So then the poor bicep tendon gets it all. So my advice would be, if you are new to strength training and you don't do it that regularly, stay away from tricep dips. Rather find other things like cable machines, or ask your personal trainer for other exercises to strengthen up your triceps. And then again, make sure that you've got good posture. Something that I forgot with the previous two is to explain where you feel the pain. So rotator cuff injuries, the pain often refers down into the arm. It doesn't often refer below the elbow. It's often into this bit, into the bicep area, or into the side of it. And it can be very similar to an impingement, where it's rotation movements that gets it. If it's really inflamed and sore, it can just hurt in any position, but more likely you'll find that it's when you reach in a certain position that it just catches. Then for shoulder impingement, that is usually painful with any movements above 90 degrees shoulder height. And again, it's painful in the shoulder, but it can very often refer down to the elbow as well. Biceps tendon, very much over the front of the shoulder. It can tighten up your bicep when it's really bad, but it's quite a distinctive ache along this bit. None of these causes pins and needles or funny sensations in the hand. If you're getting anything like that, it's likely more that it's coming from your neck, which is the last one that I'm going to cover now. So let's just have a look. Oh, Christelle. Excellent. We're going to get to your question in a minute, Christelle. Okay, so for neck pain, if you're getting pain mainly in this area, and not so much into this or down, it's very likely more that it's your neck or your thoracic spine or muscle in this area that you've actually pulled. Also, if the neck is really tight and stiff, or you've got any type of injury there, it can cause nerve irritation that can send pain down the arm, and usually that involves some sort of tingling or pain in certain fingers, or just a funny sensation in certain fingers. But that's really only in the severe cases. Often it's just really tightness and that you feel you want to stretch it often. The main cause for injuries of the neck in the gym is poor form. Typically sit-ups, where people try to do as many sit-ups as possible, but they forget that the poor neck is actually meant to curl first and then the rest. So they leave the neck behind, and then they end up with headaches and stiff necks that can take days to resolve. Again, if you're pushing weights, you've got to make sure that your chin stays in and that your neck stays tall, that you don't come out into that position, because then you're actually squashing your joints. What else? If you are tired and you're doing movements that involves quick movements with momentum, like swinging stuff, then you could also be predisposed to injuring your neck. There's nothing wrong with using momentum exercises like kettlebells and things. It's just when you're already tired and you're at the end of your training session that you're more likely to injure yourself. Now that I touch on that, one thing that can lead to injury in any part of the body is actually if you don't do a proper warm-up either. Remember, you've got to prime your muscles as well as your nervous system for what is about to come. So if you don't do a proper warm-up and you jump into high-intensity training quickly, or heavy weights or complex movements, then you are likely to strain any number of things, and that counts for the whole body. So make sure you're warming up properly. Good. Then let's continue on to how can you continue to train if you're injured. And once I've done this section, I'll come to the questions and see if there's anything specific that I still need to touch on there. So the first step would be identify what's wrong. It's a very different thing or very different treatment that you need if you've torn a rotator cuff or any other muscle from an impingement, from a neck issue. So you really need a diagnosis and to understand what's going on. Then secondly is relative rest. So just because your shoulder hurts when you do a certain movement doesn't mean you can't do any movements. Which kind of leads into the following one of just restricting your range of movement. So by relative rest, I mean cut out the things that really aggravates it. So if you find that you can do exercises with the arms below 90 degrees flexion, which is usually the case, because as soon as you move to there, things start squashing in there. So you can still do biceps, you can do triceps, you can do rotation activities. You can do anything. I've had people with rotator cuff tears who could do pull downs. They could do seated rows. All they couldn't do for a period of time was stuff where they had to really abduct or flex the arm against gravity. And for those, they just needed to cut the weight right down, practice it first without weight, and then really build it up slowly. But with regards to the shoulder, retraining your stability is likely more important than getting back to weights. So if you have an injury, first of all, figure out what caused it. What's the diagnosis and what caused it? Because then you know how to rectify it for the future. Work on your stability. So check, can I keep and maintain a good posture with my shoulder blades out of the way while I do weight training? If the answer is no, then that is where you've got to start. And then restrict your range of movement for a while. So only do the exercises in the pain-free range of movement. Now that's where the eGym system in Change is quite good, because you can set that machine up that it electronically won't actually allow you past the range of movement you can do. So when you use the regular machines or free weights, you can still get tired and make a mistake and go too far. But that machine literally thinks for you. As long as you make sure that you set it up properly, then it will allow you to train without actually further injuring yourself. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to say for tonight. Let's go on to the questions. So let's see. Christelle, you're saying, I hurt my arm last year, June. Now sit with a tennis elbow. That is really, really annoying, Christelle. Let me just see. Went for physio, exercise injection, but still struggling with the arm. Anything else I can do or try? So the big thing with the tennis elbow is it all depends on how you got it. So what would be useful to know is, did you actually get it from playing a racket sport? Not a lot of people get that. Bizarrely enough, even though it's called tennis elbow, it's usually from mundane tasks like using a computer too much. But if it is from doing a sport, you've got to check, what did you do to overuse that area? So if it was tennis or something that you played, is it that you trying to rely only on your arm strength rather than using your hips and things as well? With regards to treatment, if you've tried injection and exercises and that didn't work, then it's difficult to say because I'm not sure about the level of exercise you tried. With tennis elbows, you've got to start really slowly, and you've got to start with sometimes just isometrics, just holding the position. And then you've got to really slowly progress it, but you have to get it to heavy weights eventually. So I can't really be more specific than that without knowing the full history and what you've tried. But it is exercise that fixes it eventually. If there are things in your daily life that you're doing that means that you can't rest it, then using a splint that actually immobilizes your wrist, because that's the muscles that move the wrist that causes tennis elbow, can often be quite useful as well, because then that forces you to stop using it. So that may be an option if that's the case. Okay, and Annette, you're saying, I have terrible pain when I think the traps muscle that I think is the trap muscle. Is there anything I can do to prevent it? Thanks in advance. Okay, so Annette, I would want to know, so when you say the trap muscle, I'm going to assume that you're getting pain into this area. Now, again, you've got to ask yourself, what is the driver? Is it that you get the pain after you've exercised, or is it just day to day that you get it for no apparent reason? If it is from exercise, then you've definitely got to check your posture and the amount of weight you're using, because something that you're doing is aggravating it. So you've got to analyze, pinpoint which activities, because then you can start to unpick those and decide what exactly it is in that that's aggravating it. If it's day-to-day life, I know people can get a lot of discomfort and pain in this area from stress. They can get it from working on a computer all day, not taking enough breaks, if the computer setup isn't right, or even things like sleeping on pillows that's not quite the right height, that it affects the neck. So yes, that's unfortunately as specific as I can be without knowing your specific case anymore. But if it's from exercise that you're getting it, definitely identify what activity in your exercise session, unpick that and try to get to the bottom of what it is. Is it too much weight, or is it the posture that you're using when you're doing it? Thank you for watching. If you would like to learn more about preventing sports injuries, make sure you hit the subscribe button. See you next time.